more on that breaking news just in our newsroom. A judge dismissing the charges against both former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. The judge finding the prosecutor in those cases, Lindsay Halligan, was illegally appointed, meaning any actions she's taken as acting U.S. attorney were unlawful. Courts and legal reporter with The Hill, Zach Schoenfeld, is with me now to help me break all of this down. Zach, all of this really hot off the presses. Let's start at the beginning with this breaking news on the judge throwing out the charges against former FBI Director James Comey and Letitia James, saying that Halligan is accused of lying to Congress, saying that, Comey lied to Congress when he testified that he never authorized FBI officials to leak information to the press. What are you learning, and what has the White House said in response to this?
Hey, good afternoon, Nick. This ruling just coming down from this judge here in just the last few minutes, dismissing both these high-profile prosecutions against both James Comey and Letitia James. Both of these rulings, they're very similar. It's for the same reason, saying that a U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia who has brought both of these indictments, Lindsay Halligan, was unlawfully appointed. So this ruling at its core really has nothing to do with the actual merits of these criminal allegations against Comey and James, whether it be the lying to Congress allegations against James Comey or the mortgage fraud accusations against Letitia James. They deny that, of course, but instead this ruling is really saying that this U.S. attorney was never lawfully appointed in the first place, and so all of these actions, specifically when she went before those grand juries to seek those indictments, that all of that is invalid and that these charges all have to be dismissed.
Zach, I'm glad that you said that this has nothing to do with whether or not the merits of the case were valid or invalid. The judge is saying, before we even go any further than that, if I'm understanding you correctly, the person who brought these charges never should have been in that role.
That's right. And in fact, another thing that has been making a lot of news in recent days, specifically about James Comey's case, was a lot about what happened in those grand jury proceedings. There have been questions about, the transcripts of those proceedings, whether the grand jury actually saw the final indictment that was eventually handed up to the judge. The government at one point had conceded that it was not shown. Then they submitted a filing reversing, saying that it was. But this ruling is instead totally on a different thread. In fact, it's actually even by a different judge, because this issue had to dealt with Lindsay Halligan's appointment. It gets into a bit of a unique circumstance where they actually have to pull in a judge from a different court to adjudicate this. So this is Judge Cameron Curry, a judge who normally would serve in South Carolina and is an appointee of former President Bill Clinton.
In fact, not to get too into the weeds, but this may have even saved Ms. Halligan any kind of retribution on her end legally, because if indeed that indictment had been changed like the judge had suggested, that could have had her censured or brought up on legal charges of her own. Do you believe these charges will be appealed, though?
I think, the Justice Department, although we haven't heard from them quite yet, you'd imagine that they are likely going to appeal this. Obviously, we've seen them in all sorts of cases. Usually we're talking about civil lawsuits and challenges to Trump administration policies. Here we are talking about criminal prosecution, so a bit of a different bucket. But still, we see the Trump administration, never being afraid to appeal things. But certainly that is the top question right now as to whether they will appeal this ruling and start trying to get these prosecutions potentially revived.
And Zach, by all accounts, both Comey and James, formidable opponents to the president, who are very versed in legalese and had strong defense teams of their own. Comey, in his defense, had planned to talk about vindictive prosecution. We didn't even get to hear it that far, right? What reaction are you hearing, and how does this look?
Yeah, that's right. All these other issues that we've been talking about ever since these charges were brought, we didn't even get to those. Now, those motions we expected to be decided soon, but this is really, the first one out of the gate. Now, I will also say the timing here, it was expected. The judge had indicated that they would be ruling in advance of Thanksgiving, so we knew it would be coming this week. But if this ruling is allowed to stand, all of that other stuff, including the vindictive prosecution motions that you mentioned, Nick, we'd never get to. And of course, now, if the Justice Department does want to appeal and they win, of course, that would be the next roadblock that they'd have to get through. All of those motions would still have to be adjudicated. So if these prosecutions ever do get to trial, it certainly seems that there would be a long road ahead, even if they are revived someday.
Zach, I've got less than 30 seconds, but I do want to ask you, do you expect any type of legal action from either James or Comey back at the Justice Department because of what they called a vindictive prosecution?
They certainly may try, but at this point, I think that is still a bit unclear. We haven't heard from either of them vowing to do so. I think in those types of lawsuits, there sometimes can be a very high bar to bring them. But certainly that is going to be one of the questions now as these cases, at least as of now, are fizzling out.